As the helicopter hovered over the cliffs during what was supposed to be a scenic anniversary trip, my sister leaned in, gave me a cold smile, and shoved me out, whispering, "You've always been in the way." But the part that haunts me most? My husband just stood there, completely still, not shocked, not panicked. He knew. He knew what she was going to do, and he let it happen. "Hi, I'm Harper." Can you imagine the absolute gut-wrenching betrayal of your own sister shoving you out of a helicopter, whispering, "You've always been in the way," while your husband just stands there, watching you fall? They thought I was dead. They thought they'd cash in on my company and a $5 million insurance policy. But I didn't die that day. And I walked into my own funeral. Do you think betrayal like that ever truly ends? Or does it just wait, hidden in the people you trust most? Tell me, would you have survived this? Let me know where you're listening from, because this story isn't over yet. The cold in Aspen that morning was brutal, biting, like it was trying to tell me something. I stood by the helicopter, watching snowflakes melt on my jacket, my breath a cloud in the thin mountain air. I desperately wanted to believe this trip was a fresh start, not just another patch on a marriage that was already tearing apart at the seams. My husband, Rowan, fastened the harness around my waist. His smile was that same polished, practiced one he used on clients. "Happy anniversary," he said, a quick kiss on my cheek. I tried to soak in the warmth, but the wind was too sharp. Then there was Malice, my sister. Her perfume was so strong it almost drowned out the pine. She hugged me tight. "You deserve this day, Harper," she whispered, but her eyes darted away too fast. Her hair was perfect, her lipstick a deep, unsettling red as she smiled for the camera she was already holding up. The blade started to turn, chopping the air, pulling at my hair. I climbed in, settled into the seat, and watched Malice and Rowan slide in beside me. Their knees brushed. Their smiles were aimed everywhere but at me. The pilot gave a thumbs up, and with a shudder, we lifted off. There's something about seeing the world from above that always made me believe in possibilities. The trees below, dusted white, the rivers like silver threads. I wanted to believe this was a step towards something better. Rowan's hand brushed mine on the seat, and for a second, just a second, I thought maybe we could fix what was broken. But then Malice glanced over her shoulder at me, and there was nothing warm in her eyes. Just cold, hard calculation. I turned away, focusing on the view, pretending I hadn't seen it. The helicopter banked left, giving us a sweeping view of the mountains. Malice lifted her phone, turning it toward Rowan and me. "Smile for the family, Harper," she said, her voice too bright. Too bright. She leaned in closer, angling the camera, her hair brushing my cheek. I tried to smile, but Rowan's face was a mask, unreadable. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. My stomach tightened. I forced the corners of my mouth up. A hollow performance. The engine's hum was a steady beat in my chest, masking the frantic thudding of my heart as Malice moved closer, closer than she needed to for a photo. Her phone dropped to her side, her lips near my ear. "You've always been in the way," she whispered. It took a second for the words to land, a second for me to process the absolute ice in her voice. Then her hand pressed against my shoulder. I saw Rowan. Arms crossed. Leaning back. His face blank. He didn't move. He didn't even flinch. I wanted to scream, but the wind tore it from my throat as Malice shoved. The world tilted violently. I saw her red lipstick curve into a small, satisfied smile as I fell backward. The white of the snow and sky swallowed me as I tumbled, the rotor's roar turning into a dull thump, thump, thump that matched the panic in my chest. The air was sharp against my skin, my hair whipping across my face. Time fractured. Rowan's voice echoed. "Trust me, Harper. We're in this together." Trust. What a pretty lie. Branches blurred below me, and instinct screamed louder than fear. I reached, praying, hoping, clawing at the air until my fingers scraped against a thick branch. Pain exploded through my arm as I caught it. The force wrenched my shoulder, something snapping, hot and bright. But I stopped falling. I hung there, gasping, pain lancing through every breath as the world finally went silent, except for the soft rasp of snow falling from the branches above. The helicopter was gone, just a dot in the sky now, carrying away the people who had decided my life was worth $5 million. I pulled myself closer to the trunk, every movement a wave of agony, my vision blurring as blood dripped from a cut on my temple. I didn't cry. There was no room for tears, only breath, only survival. The snow soaked into my jeans, numbing the pain in my legs as I leaned my head back against the rough bark. I wanted to sleep, to let it all fade, but a quiet, stubborn voice reminded me, not today. Lying here would let them win. The snow around me was stained pink where blood had soaked through. I forced myself to take inventory. My right leg was bent wrong, a bolt of pain shooting up whenever I tried to shift. My shoulder hung low, useless. My fingers trembled as I pressed them to the ground, feeling for something solid to grip, whispering words my mother used to say, "You don't get to quit, Harper." Slowly, inch by inch, I pushed up, the icy ground biting into my palms. I saw a fallen branch within reach, thick enough to hold my weight. Rolling onto my side, I pulled it toward me, ignoring the tears that blurred my vision. It wasn't crying. It was pain leaking out. I pressed the branch into the snow, testing it, and forced myself to stand, leaning my weight onto it as a makeshift crutch. My leg screamed, but I ground my teeth and moved anyway. One step, then another. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. Pain twisted time until all I knew was the next step and the next breath. The wind cut through my jacket, chilling me to the bone. I told myself to keep moving, that if I stopped, I'd never get up again. That was what Malice and Rowan were counting on, wasn't it? A shape appeared in the distance, low and half swallowed by the snow. As I limped closer, it sharpened into a small cabin. I dragged myself forward, every breath a growl, until I reached the door, hammering on it with the last of my strength. No one answered. I checked the knob. Unlocked. The door creaked open to a gust of warmer air. The cabin smelled of old wood and stale smoke, but it was shelter. I stumbled inside, the door falling shut behind me, and dropped to my knees, shaking. My eyes scanned the room, finding a wood stove, a stack of blankets, and a dusty first aid kit. I crawled over, dragging the kit toward me, pulling out bandages with trembling hands. As I wrapped my leg and tied a makeshift sling around my shoulder, memories flickered, unbidden. Warm and sharp. Malice as a child curling against me during storms, whispering, "Don't leave me, Harper! Promise you won't leave me!" Her tiny fingers gripping mine, her eyes wide with fear. She used to be afraid of thunder. I used to hold her until she fell asleep. I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing my hands to keep working. That same girl who used to beg me to stay had just tried to throw me out of her way permanently. The sting of betrayal burned deeper than the wounds. A crackle broke the silence. I turned my head toward an old radio on the shelf, its red light blinking, static hissed. Then a voice cut through, rough and clipped. "Woman presumed dead, body unrecovered, presumed fatal fall near the ridge." My name followed, clear and heavy in the stale air of the cabin. They had already filed me as gone, erased me as easily as crossing out a line on a page. I forced myself to stand, wobbling toward the old rotary phone on the counter. The screen flickered alive, showing a weather app. A notification popped up. "Bank alert, transaction pending." I knew that number. The policy we'd paid into for years. They had already filed the insurance claim. Rowan and Malice weren't even waiting for my body to be found. A laugh, dry and sharp, escaped me before turning into a cough that rattled my ribs. My tears dried up, leaving my eyes aching and raw. "They think I'm dead," I whispered to the empty room, gripping the edge of the counter for balance. "Let them think that." I pulled a heavy coat from the peg near the door, the smell of pine and old smoke settling around me like armor. My mind cleared. The fear replaced with something colder, sharper. I would not go back to them broken and begging. I would go back ready. Vera's voice came to me then, clear as if she stood beside me. "Call me if the world burns, Harper." Vera, my old partner, who knew how to fight the kind of battles that didn't leave bruises on the skin, but shredded everything else. I needed to get to her, to someone who would believe me before Rowan and Malice could bury me for good. I found a pair of old ranger boots by the door, stiff but usable. I wrapped my wounds tighter, shoved my feet into the boots, and pulled the coat around me, bracing as I opened the door again. The cold hit me like a slap, but I letting it strip away the fear, leaving only purpose. The snow crunched under the old boots, the wind scraping past. I kept one hand on the makeshift crutch, the other pressing against my ribs where each breath felt like it was pulling me apart. But I moved step by step because stopping wasn't an option. I could almost hear my mother's voice, "You can't quit, Harper." I didn't know how many hours passed as I limped down the slope. The sky turned from steel gray to the bruised purple of early dawn. The cold wasn't as sharp now, more like a constant ache that reminded me I was still alive, despite everything they had done to make sure I wasn't. Every slip on the ice sent lightning through my leg, but I gritted my teeth and forced my weight back onto the branch, muttering promises under my breath that I would make them pay. The trees thinned, and ahead I saw the glow of a sign buzzing above a small diner on the outskirts of town. My body screamed to collapse, to curl up in the snow, but I kept going, dragging myself across the parking lot until I pushed through the door. The bell chimed. Heads turned. A hush fell over the room as people took in the sight of me, hair matted with frozen blood, clothes torn, face raw from wind and tears. A teenage waitress took a cautious step forward, her eyes wide. "Ma'am, do you need help?" I didn't answer. I just moved past her, collapsing into a corner booth, the vinyl seat cold against my back. My eyes landed on the payphone near the bathrooms. I reached into the pocket of the coat and pulled out a few coins I'd found, forcing my trembling fingers to slot them in. The dial tone was a lifeline. I punched in Vera's number from memory, leaning my forehead against the wall as it rang. "Vera." My voice was a rasp when she answered. "It's me." There was a pause, a sharp intake of breath. "Harper. Jesus. They said you were." "I know what they said. Listen to me. I need help. Quiet help. I'm on my way." Her voice was steady, like it always had been. And for a moment, I could breathe again. I hung up and turned just as the TV mounted in the corner changed to a local news segment. The words at the bottom of the screen made my stomach twist. "Local CO Harper Thorne missing, presumed dead in helicopter tragedy." I watched, frozen, as footage rolled of Rowan standing at a podium, Malice beside him, her face buried in his shoulder as he wrapped an arm around her. They looked like grieving family, like victims of some cruel accident, not the executioners they truly were. "Please respect our privacy during this difficult time," Rowan said into the microphone, his voice breaking in a way I had once thought was sincere. Malice lifted her head, mascara streaking down her cheeks, shaking as she clung to him. Behind them, the logo of my company stood tall. The company I built with years of sweat, while they pretended to mourn me. A sharp laugh escaped me, and a man in the next booth shot me a glance before quickly looking away. I dug my nails into my palm, grounding myself. Let them cry their crocodile tears for the cameras. Let them think they had won. The bell above the door jingled again, and Vera walked in, scanning the diner until her eyes found me. She crossed the room quickly, her coat still dusted with snow, and slid into the booth across from me. "God, Harper!" She reached out, but I pulled back, not ready for comfort yet. "I need to see the accounts," I said. She nodded, pulling out her laptop. "They moved everything," she whispered, turning the screen toward me. "Transferred under your signature, a note left behind saying, in case of disappearance, funds will secure company continuity." My chest tightened, not from pain, but from the realization of how thoroughly they had planned this. They weren't just stealing my life. They were making it look like I had given it to them willingly. Vera hesitated. "There's more. They've started rumors, Harper. The media is hinting that you were unstable before the accident. They're framing you as paranoid, saying you talked about people being out to get you. They're setting the stage." I leaned back, letting the reality sink in, letting the betrayal burn until it became fuel. They want the world to believe I was unwell, that I ran off, maybe even ended it myself. Vera closed the laptop, her eyes hard. What do you want to do? I clenched my fists until my knuckles went white. They think they've won. I met Vera's gaze, steady and unflinching. We're going to take everything back. And if they want a funeral, I'll give them one they'll never forget. I stood outside the funeral home, Vera's black dress clinging to my skin, the cold air brushing over my bare arms as if daring me to turn back. I adjusted the neckline, staring at my reflection in the darkened window, trying to find the woman they thought they had buried in the snow. My breath fogged the glass as I whispered, "You don't get to quit." It was early afternoon, the wind sharp, the sky a pale blue that made the world look too clean for the lies waiting inside. I took one last breath and pushed the door open, stepping into the scent of lilies and cheap cologne. A hush fell like a dropped glass. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Heads turned. Cameras snapped. Gasps rippled through the rows of seats as people turned to see the ghost they thought they were mourning. Malice was mid-sob, her handkerchief frozen halfway to her face, eyes wide and unblinking. Rowan stood at the podium, his mouth still open in a word that never came. A journalist in the back yelled, "Is that her? Is that Harper Thorne?" I kept walking. The heels Vera had lent me clicking on the tile floor, steady and deliberate. I passed the poster board near the entrance, my portrait printed in black and white, a black ribbon pinned across the corner. The words, "In loving memory," scrolled beneath my name made me pause for a beat before I looked up at Rowan. "I see you've started without me," I said, my voice calm, letting the silence swallow the room again. My gaze moved across the faces, neighbors, board members, local officials. All of them gathered to mourn a death that wasn't real. Rowan blinked, his expression flickering from shock to something practiced, something public. His lips curved into a strange smile as he stepped toward me with arms outstretched. "Harper, thank God you're alive. We thought you were." I stepped back, letting his arms hang uselessly in the air. "Save it." Gasps filled the room again, murmurs rippling through the rows like wind in tall grass. Some people stood, backing away from me as if afraid I might collapse. Others stared with wide eyes, phones raised to capture the scene unfolding. Malice moved next, stepping forward with a trembling hand. Her face streaked with fresh tears. "Harper, we thought you ran. You've been under so much stress. Remember? You said people were watching you. You were scared." Her voice cracked, the perfect note of concern, but her eyes never met mine. I felt something sharp and clear settle in my chest. "You can tell your lies to them," I said, gesturing to the cameras and the reporters inching closer. "But you can't lie to me anymore." A murmur broke out among the guests. Journalists leaned forward, microphones raised as questions poured out. "Where have you been? Is it true you were unstable before the accident? What happened up there on the mountain?" Flashes from the cameras flickered like lightning. The air buzzed with whispers and the sharp clicks of shutters. Security moved in, trying to contain the chaos as I stood in the middle of the storm, unmoving. Rowan's jaw tightened, but he kept his fake concern plastered on his face, trying to guide me away from the crowd. "Harper, let's get you out of here. You need help." I pulled my arm back, looking him straight in the eye. "The only help I need is for you to get your hands off me." From the corner of my eye, I saw Vera slip through the crowd, her face calm, her eyes sharp. She moved close, pressing a small flash drive into my palm, her lips barely moving as she whispered, "When you're ready." I closed my hand around it, the weight of it grounding me in the chaos. Cameras were still clicking, questions still coming, but all I could hear was the quiet certainty in my mind. If they wanted a funeral, I would give them one they would never forget. I slid the flash drive into my pocket, feeling its small weight as I left the funeral home. Vera's car was parked a block down. We didn't speak until the car doors closed, the quiet inside a stark contrast to the chaos we left. We drove through the fading light, the sky bleeding into evening. I could see the tension in Vera's knuckles on the steering wheel, But she didn't press me for words. Instead, she just said, "You need to see what's on this." Her voice was low, steady, like it always was when she handled bad news. At her apartment, we sat at a small table near the window, the glow of the city pulsing like a restless heartbeat. She brought her laptop over, the hum of it filling the silence as she inserted the drive. I stared out the window for a moment, watching the lights blur, the cold seeping in, even through the glass. My hands were steady, but inside I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. The screen came alive with folders, files labeled with dates and code names I didn't recognize at first. Vera clicked through them methodically, opening bank statements and transfer confirmations. Each click was like a nail being driven deeper. My name was there, my signature, or what looked like it, authorizing transfers I had never seen. Money siphoned off into hidden accounts, moved around under layers of fake shells. "Harper, look at this." Vera's voice was clipped, but I heard the anger beneath it. She pulled up an email chain. Messages between Malice and Rowan, my sister and my husband, planning the day they would push me out of the way, literally, and cash in on the insurance that came with my name. "She's a liability now. We can't let her ruin everything." Rowan's words on the screen. It felt like I was being pushed again, this time without the wind rushing past my face to distract me. My breath caught. My hands trembled, but my face stayed cold. I read it twice, then a third time, letting the betrayal burn itself into my memory. They planned this. All of it. My voice was quiet, but the edges were sharp enough to cut through the room. Vera didn't respond, just reached for her phone, dialing her lawyer friend. "We can freeze your shared accounts," she said after hanging up. "Start the process to take back control of the company before they drain everything." The next morning, the three of us sat in a cramped office at a law firm downtown. Papers rustled, the lawyer's hands moving quickly as he pulled up records, checking balances, verifying signatures. His eyes darted between me and Vera, his lips pressing into a thin line. Finally, he stood, his face pale. "Harper, I'm sorry. They've already filed documents claiming you're mentally unfit. They moved fast. Your accounts are frozen under a protective hold, and they're pushing to take over your voting rights and the company." The walls seemed to tighten around me, the air too thick to breathe. I heard the echo of Malice's voice, the feel of her hand on my back before she shoved me. Rowan's blank stare as I fell. I clenched my fists, feeling my nails dig into my palms. They knew I'd come for them. I whispered, more to myself than to Vera or the lawyer. Every moment replayed in my head. Each lie, each cold smile, each whisper that told me to trust them. "I need a minute," I said, standing and stepping into the hallway, finding the restroom at the end. The mirror above the sink was cracked, a jagged line running through the reflection of my face. I gripped the edges of the sink, letting the cold porcelain ground me as tears blurred the edges of my vision. But I wiped them away, letting the anger clear the fog. "Not this time," I whispered to the woman in the mirror. The woman they thought they could break, the woman they left for dead. I walked back into the office, meeting Vera's eyes. "We'll find another way," I told her, letting the steel in my voice settle into the room. "They want me weak. That's how they'll lose." As we gathered our things, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, the screen lighting up with a text from an unknown number. "I know what they did. Meet me." I stared at the message, the world narrowing to the glow of the screen, knowing this could be an ally or a trap. I needed to face them. I locked eyes with Vera before stepping out of her apartment. The message still glowing on my phone. I didn't tell her the details, just that I needed to follow this lead. She wanted to come, but I shook my head, assuring her I'd call if things went sideways. The cold air bit into my skin as I walked the few blocks to the diner, the kind with a neon sign half lit, buzzing against the quiet of the late hour. Sliding into a corner booth, I kept my back to the wall, eyes tracking every shadow that moved past the foggy windows. The smell of burnt coffee and grease clung to the air, grounding me in the reality that I wasn't dead, wasn't done yet. I traced the rim of the chipped coffee mug in front of me, steadying my breathing. The door chimed, and a man in a worn green jacket stepped in, scanning the room before his eyes landed on me. He moved with the caution of someone who'd been burned too many times. As he approached, I caught the slight limp in his step. He slid into the booth across from me, removing a knit cap to reveal messy hair and tired eyes. "Name's Aaron," he said, voice low, glancing around before leaning in. "I know what Malice and your husband did to you." I didn't blink. "How?" He exhaled, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "I used to work for Malice. Hell, I was stupid enough to think I loved her. She used me, tossed me when she didn't need me anymore. But before she did, I kept copies of things that would burn her to the ground if they ever saw daylight." I studied him, searching for the lie. "Why now? Why me?" His eyes dropped to the table, fingers picking at a crack in the formica. "Because I've seen how she destroys people and walks away smiling. I thought I could ignore it, live with it. But when I saw your face on the news, when I heard what they said about you, I couldn't anymore. I didn't trust him, but I believed him. Or maybe I just wanted to believe him because I needed something, anything to turn the tide." He pulled a small key from his pocket, sliding it across to me. "There's a storage unit 2 blocks from here. Everything's in there. Fake medical files, insurance forms, even emails between her and your husband about how they'd handle you." The word handle made me grip the key harder than I meant to. I slipped it into my pocket, eyes still locked on his. "Why help me, Aaron? You know what she's capable of." He let out a hollow laugh. "Yeah, I do. But maybe I'm done being a coward." I left some cash on the table and stood, feeling the weight of every eye in the diner on me as we stepped into the cold again. Vera met us a block away, her car idling under a street light. We didn't speak much as we drove to the storage facility. Inside the unit, the fluorescent lights flickered as I turned the key, pulling the metal door open with a screech. Boxes neatly stacked, labeled with dates and names that made bile rise in my throat. Malice's handwriting was everywhere, her careful script mocking me from the labels. Files about my health, fake diagnoses, her plans to paint me as unstable to secure the payout. Vera's breath caught as she flipped through one of the folders. "Harper, this is enough to bury them." I didn't get to answer. My phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with a video call request. It was her. I hit accept, holding the phone at arm's length as Malice's face filled the screen, calm and composed in a way that made my skin crawl. "Well, look at you," she purred, tilting her head. "Digging around where you shouldn't be." "You know where I am?" I asked, my voice steady even as my pulse thundered. She smirked, her eyes cold and unblinking. "Of course I do. You think you've won something, Harper? You think you're clever? You've always been so fragile. It's adorable that you think you can fight me. You tried to kill me." Her smile didn't falter. "Careful what you say. I still have friends in high places. And if you even think about going public with any of that," she nodded toward the boxes behind me, "I will make sure the world sees every dirty little secret you've tried to keep hidden. Do you really think they'd side with you once they know everything?" The call ended before I could answer, leaving me staring at my reflection in the black screen. The cold of the unit seeped into my bones as the fear settled in, but I forced myself to breathe, to think. Back in the car, I felt the weight of it all pressing down, crushing me as I stared out the windshield into the darkness. Malice's voice echoed in my head, the memory of her pushing me, the air rushing past me, the cold, the betrayal. "She's still controlling everything," I whispered, my hands shaking as I pressed them to my eyes. Vera reached over, gripping my hand firmly. "She's scared, Harper. That's why she's lashing out. She knows you're alive, and she knows you're coming for her." I let out a shaky breath, wiping the tears from my cheeks, letting the anger burn away the fear. I turned to Vera, my voice calm. "Then let her be scared. It's my turn now." We drove back to Vera's, the boxes locked in the trunk, the silence between us no longer heavy, but charged, alive with purpose. As we parked, I glanced back at the storage unit key in my hand, then at Vera. "I need to open that locker again." I said, voice quiet but certain. There's one file in there that will either free me or destroy everything I have left. I stepped out of Vera's car, gripping the folder against my chest. The cold Denver air sliced across my face like a reminder that I was still alive, still fighting. Snow crunched under my boots as I made my way toward the courthouse building. Each breath was a cloud that dissolved into the morning light. This was it. No more hiding. No more being pushed around by people who thought they could decide when I was worth keeping alive. Inside, the hallway smelled of stale coffee and cleaning chemicals. Vera walked beside me, her hand brushing mine for a moment before she let go, letting me take the lead. We passed through security, the guard giving me a curious glance as I placed the folder on the conveyor belt. I met his gaze without flinching. In a private conference room near the courthouse, they waited. Malice sat with her perfect posture, her hair pinned back, pretending concern. My husband was there, too, pretending grief so well I almost believed him. But the quick flash of fear in his eyes when he saw me sent a thrill down my spine. There were a few others, his lawyer, a family friend who had always believed the worst about me, and another woman who kept checking her phone as if she wanted to be anywhere else. I closed the door behind me, the click loud enough to turn every head in the room. I didn't bother to sit down. I let the folder drop onto the table, the sound sharp in the stillness. Harper! My husband started, standing up like he was about to embrace me, like we were in some reunion movie. I held up a hand. Don't. His mouth opened and closed, and he sat back down, his eyes darting toward Malice, who had gone pale before her lips curled into that familiar condescending smile. Well, she said, folding her hands. Look who decided to show up. We were so worried about you. I ignored her, opening the folder and spreading the documents across the table, pages of emails, bank transfers, insurance claims, and copies of fake medical records. Their crimes in black and white, undeniable. This is what you did, I said, my voice calm, even as my pulse thundered. This is who you are. Malice laughed, the sound hollow. Harper, really, this is embarrassing. You've always had these episodes. We tried to help you, but you just won't let us, will you? She glanced around the room as if seeking agreement. She's unstable, she said to the others, her tone laced with pity. She's always been unstable. I looked her dead in the eyes, letting the silence drag until she finally looked away. You whispered, you've always been in the way before you pushed me out of that helicopter. You didn't think I'd live to say it back to your face, did you? The air seemed to disappear from the room. Even my husband wouldn't look at me now, staring down at the table, his hands clenched into fists. You don't have proof of any of this, Malice snapped, her composure cracking. Outside, Vera and Aaron were working, and I knew it. I could feel it in the way my phone buzzed in my pocket. Message after message lighting up the screen. While Malice kept talking, Vera was posting portions of the evidence online, tagging local news stations, community groups, and every person who had ever believed Malice's lies. Your lies aren't going to work anymore, I said quietly. Malice's phone vibrated. Then again and again. She looked down, her eyes widening as she scrolled, her face draining of color. The room filled with a soft chiming of notifications, one phone after another lighting up. My husband's lawyer cleared his throat, glancing at him, then at Malice before turning his gaze to me with something that almost looked like respect. The family friend who had always hated me shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Malice's hands shook as she clutched her phone, her eyes darting around like a cornered animal. You think this is over? She hissed, standing so quickly her chair toppled behind her. I stepped closer, my voice steady. No, it's just beginning. She glared at me, her jaw working, but she couldn't find the words. For once, she had nothing to spin, nothing to hide behind. I picked up the folder, gathering the pages slowly, carefully, making sure she saw that I was in control now, that I wasn't afraid of her anymore. As I stepped outside into the biting air, the cold didn't feel like punishment this time. It felt like freedom, crisp and clean, washing away the fear and the years of letting them decide who I was allowed to be. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't check it immediately. For the first time in a long time, I felt the ground solid under my feet. The air in my lungs was mine to breathe. I knew the fight wasn't over yet. But I was ready. As I pushed through the courthouse doors, the cold morning air hit me, sharp and real, grounding me for what was ahead. A crowd had formed. Reporters jostling, cameras flashing, people with their phones raised, streaming every second of my walk into the daylight. I held the folder against my chest, inhaling deeply, reminding myself why I had to keep going, why I couldn't let them silence me again. The murmurs grew louder as I stepped forward. I caught fragments. Is that her? She's alive. What's happening? My hands trembled for a second before I clenched them, steadying my breath. This was bigger than me now. It was about every person who had ever been pushed aside, told they were nothing, who was forced to smile while people like Malice and Rowan stole everything. Just as I began to find my rhythm, phones started buzzing around me, notifications lighting up screens, faces turning toward each other with confusion. Vera was at my side, her phone in hand, her eyes scanning the headlines that began to flood in. "Harper," she said softly. "They're trying to spin it." Malice had moved fast. News alerts popped up showing fake documents with my forged signature, claiming I had siphoned company money into private accounts. Headlines accused me of being unstable, a fraud, a woman who had faked her own death to cover her crimes. My name was trending, but for all the wrong reasons. For a heartbeat, the fear I had fought so hard to bury clawed back up, cold and familiar. The fear of being unheard, of losing everything again, of watching them take what was mine while smiling in my face. I looked down, my reflection wavering in a puddle at my feet, and saw the woman they had tried to make me, broken, silent, easy to erase. "Are you ready?" Vera whispered beside me. I looked up at her, at the people who were waiting, at the cameras that were still recording. I pulled my phone from my pocket, gripping it so tightly my knuckles burned. "Yeah," I said, lifting my head. "I'm ready." We moved to the steps, the crowd parting as we stepped forward. Vera connected my phone to the small portable projector we had prepared, the image flickering onto the side of the courthouse wall. People turned, eyes wide as the video started to play. There was Malice, laughing over a glass of wine, her voice slurring as she leaned into the camera. "She's always been in the way," she said, clinking her glass with Rowan. "She never saw it coming. All it took was a push. Easy money." Their faces were clear, the words unmistakable. The truth laid bare for everyone to see. A collective gasp rolled through the crowd. Phones were raised, capturing every second, broadcasting live. Some people covered their mouths, others shouted in disbelief, the ripple of realization spreading like wildfire. I saw people looking at their screens, at me, then back at the video. I could see them understanding. From the edge of the crowd, I saw Malice's people trying to push through, yelling for the video to be taken down, for people to stop recording. But it was too late. It was already everywhere. Suddenly, Malice was there, her face red, her eyes wild as she lunged at me, screaming. "You ruined everything!" Her voice cracked, raw with rage, her carefully crafted image shattering with every step she took toward me. Security moved fast, pulling her back as she kicked and screamed, her threats cutting through the cold air. "I will destroy you!" she shrieked. "You think you've won?" I